Before we get into it, I wanted to offer you the opportunity, sir, to talk about your philosophy in this seat versus what came before you and the difference maybe between deregulation and just innovation.
Well, thank you very much. We are out to, obviously change direction at the SEC, and I think we've already done that here in my first 2.5 or so months at the agency. But we're moving away from regulation through enforcement and uncertainty in the markets, especially with respect to cryptocurrencies and digital assets in general. And we're looking to set firm, clear rules of the road for people who are operating in that environment so that innovators can innovate. They can rely on their advisors to tell them, which is the right direction and how they can build on solid ground.
Regulators, though, can't step in without explicit action from Congress. So when it comes to cryptocurrencies and the SEC, what actually comes next? What are your plans?
Well, so even before I got to the SEC, Hester Peirce, who's one of the commissioners, and she used to be my counsel when I was a commissioner back in 2002 to 2008, was in charge of a crypto task force that we're calling it, and they are focusing on making clear rules for the industry. So, for example, things like meme coins and stable coins that was just the subject of the bill that was passed yesterday are not securities, and before that was not necessarily clear. And so that's an example of how we're trying to put people at ease in the marketplace so that they can innovate and they can move forward with their plans and not have to look over their shoulder.
When you were talking to reporters yesterday after the passing of this legislation, I believe you'll be at the White House today with the president when he signs it, you said the SEC is considering a, quote, innovative exemption from regulations to incentivize tokenization. What does that exactly mean, innovative exemption, and how long does this process take?
Well, it'll be an iterative process, and right now we are working on setting forth different things that can, again, make it clear for people in the marketplace, which way is the true north for them, let's just say, so that they don't have to worry about falling off the ditch and, falling into the ditch and getting in trouble with the regulators. And so part of that will be working with our colleagues at the other regulators, and especially the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. But let's just say that as we go forth and as we interact with the marketplace, we've had 5 roundtables now looking at various aspects of the digital asset space. So we are working hard at coming up with guidance and rules, and we'll use every tool in our toolbox to help people understand what is, how to stay out of trouble, basically.
Chair Atkins, one of the big concerns is that a number of the stablecoin issuers are not going to have the sufficient number of hard currency reserves on hand to really back those notes in a way that is as advertised. How are you prepared to really counter that? Is that something that's in your list of concerns that the SEC is going to be monitoring?
Well, one thing that I think the new to-be-signed bill into law makes clear is that these are not securities, and it's the banking regulators who are going to be looking after them. And I think that's appropriate because of the role that stablecoins play, and I think will play in the future. Because part of the real promise, I think, of distributed ledger technology is immediate payment as part of the process of transactions. So settlement coming down to, in effect, almost T+0, and to do it on the trade date. And that will make things much more efficient in the marketplace, save money, reduce risk in our financial system. So stablecoins are in the realm of the bank regulators, and they will look after to make sure that there is adequate and as advertised adequate backing to the stablecoins.
Chair Atkins, just sort of switching gears a little bit, there's been a lot of discussion around Congress and the president passing legislation that would open the door for people to take their money from the 401ks and put it into private assets, in particular private equity. How do you plan to oversee and make sure that that's done in a way that isn't potentially punitive for people who are retiring at ages where they need a lot more money for a lot longer?
Well, on that issue, we've heard a lot of input from both the investors who want access to the private markets and to those sorts of products, and obviously from the people who are producing the products who are out to meet that demand. So, but we have to do it carefully, I think, because, of course, the private markets are a lot different than the public markets. Their liquidity is not the same. There are all sorts of things for people who are not aware of the rules of the road where they could get hurt. And so we will work very closely with our counterparts at the Department of Labor who have oversight over RISA accounts to make sure that, that we have appropriate guidelines around these various products. And they're really for, of course, long-term investment, especially private equity and things like that. So we have to do this in a smart way so that individual investors are not inadvertently into something that they didn't realize what they were getting into.
Well, speaking of 401k retirement plans, would you allow crypto into retirement plans? Because the Financial Times is reporting that we could see an executive order from the administration as soon as today allowing alternative investments into retirement plans.
Well, again, I think that, disclosure is key and that people need to know what they're getting into. So things like that are not for everybody. And so especially in retirement plans. So I look forward to whatever may come out from the president as far as direction goes. But we need to address it because there is a demand out there for these sorts of products, and the government should not stand as a blocking agent for those sorts of things, but we need to enable it in the proper way with proper guidelines and proper disclosures.
Chair Atkins, you run an independent agency. So does Jay Powell. I would love to know, are you under any pressure from this White House, and what would be your advice to Jay Powell? Because it seems like you have a better relationship with President Trump.
Well, I think, so I've been at the SEC now. This is the third time. I was there in the early 90s under Richard Breeden and Arthur Levitt, and then again from 02 to 08, and now here in 2025. So, frankly, I don't see really any difference in operation from back then to now. I know there's been a lot of coverage of that, but, we are working hand in glove with our counterparts in the administration and at the Office of Management and Budget and OIRA as far as talking to them about rules and other things that we are going to be publishing. So, keeping them up to date, taking their comments, which are all very good. So I don't see any real difference, frankly, in the ambit of maneuver that we have at the agency. So I look forward to achieving a lot with in the time that we have, and because there is so much to do. This is what I like to call deferred maintenance that we have to address. And so we are moving, I think, at a very quick pace. So the rest of this year, I think, we'll be churning things out and moving in a different direction.